A single sentence tucked away in a landmark piece of legislation has basically ignited a war for the future of money in America. For years, the crypto industry has been begging for regulatory clarity, a clean set of rules to finally end the era of confusing and contradictory enforcement. In 2025, that hope finally arrived in a bill called the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act, or the Clarity Act. It sailed through the House of Representatives with overwhelming bipartisan support, a truly rare sight in a divided Washington. The finish line was right there. But then everything just stopped. The very bill designed to bring peace has instead kicked off a massive conflict between the trillion-dollar crypto industry and the multi-trillion-dollar banking empire. The banks have drawn a line in the sand. They're threatening to torpedo the entire bill, which could send American crypto innovation into a dark age or force it to pack up and move overseas. Today, we're breaking down this high-stakes battle. We'll explain what the Clarity Act was supposed to do, how one tiny provision on stablecoins become a kill switch, and why the banking industry sees it as an existential threat to its entire business model. To get what this fight matters so much, you first have to understand the total chaos the Clarity Act was meant to fix. For the better part of the decade, running a crypto business in the United States has been like navigating a minefield in the dark. The main problem was a simple question that no one in government could seem to answer. Is digital tokens a security, like a stock, or a commodity, like gold? The answer to that question changes everything. If it's a security, it's regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. If it's a commodity, it's the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC. For years, these two powerful agencies couldn't draw a clear line, which led to a strategy people call regulation by enforcement. Instead of writing clear rules for everyone to follow, the SEC would just sue projects it didn't like, think Ripple or even the biggest US exchange, Coinbase, and let the courts sort it out. This uncertainty was crippling. It kept billions, if not trillions, of institutional dollars on the sidelines, terrified of investing in a market where the rules could change overnight. Innovation slowed down as developers started worrying more about legal bills than building cool new products. The Clarity Act was supposed to be the answer, passed by the House on March 1, 2026, with a strong 294-134 vote. The bill had simple but revolutionary goal. Create clear lines. It laid out frameworks where the SEC would oversee tokens that act like investments, while the CFTC would handle more decentralized tokens like Bitcoin and Ether. The bill even created a pathway for a token to evolve from an SEC-regulated asset to a CFTC-regulated one as the network grew. For the first time, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. The bill set up paths for exchanges to register, required customer protection, and gave safe harbors to software developers who weren't actually in control of a project. It was a full plan to bring digital assets into the US financial system. The industry celebrated, thinking the days of guessing games were finally over. But they missed the one provision that would turn out to be a poison pill. The whole conflict boils down to one word: yield. More specifically, the ability for stablecoins to offer a return to the people who hold them. To see why this is so explosive, you need to understand the fundamental business model of a bank. It is a model that hasn't changed in centuries and nets banks hundreds of billions of dollars a year. Here's how it works. You put your money in a saving account. The bank might pay you a tiny bit of interest, often something pathetic like 0.1%. But your money isn't just sitting there. The bank takes your deposit, which are incredibly cheap money for them, and uses them to make loans or buy safe government-backed assets like treasury bonds, which might pay them over 3.6%. That gap between the high yield the bank earns and the low interest it pays you is called the net interest margin. It's their main profit engine. Big banks like JP Morgan, Chase, with its $2.5 trillion in deposit, have perfected this to make record profits. Now enter stablecoins. These are digital dollars, tokens designed to hold a steady value because they are backed one-to-one by real-world assets, like cash and, you guessed it, US Treasury bonds. Crypto platforms realized they could do something revolutionary. Instead of pocketing all the yield from those assets, they could pass most of it directly to the stablecoin holder. Suddenly, a regular person could hold a digital dollar and potentially earn a 3.5 or 4.2% yield, a rate previously reserved for the banks themselves or their wealthiest clients. This idea absolutely terrified the banking industry. They saw a future where trillions of dollars could pour out of their accounts and into the crypto world. An advisory council to the Treasury Department even identified the entire 6.6 trillion market for US transactional deposit as being at risk from stablecoins. Even a small fraction of that moving would be catastrophic for banks' profits. This isn't just about competition. The banks see it as a fight for survival. They argue that if crypto platforms are going to offer bank-like products, they should be regulated just as strictly as banks, with the same tough capital requirements. The crypto industry fires back, saying this is just an attempt to kill innovation and protect a very profitable monopoly. This is the trillion-dollar conflict that landed right in the middle of the Clarity Act. This showdown between old-school finance and new-school tech is one of the biggest stories of our time. If you're getting some value out of this breakdown and want to stay ahead of how these power struggles will affect your money, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel a lot, and make sure you won't miss what's coming next. The fight over yield in the Clarity Act gets even more complicated because of an earlier law, the Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for US Stablecoin Act, or the GENIUS Act. Passed back in July 2025, the GENIUS Act created the first federal rules for stablecoins. Most importantly, it included a rule that explicitly banned stablecoins issuer from paying interest to holders. On the surface, this seems like a big win for the banks. But the law had a sneaky little loophole. It banned issuers from paying interest, but it didn't say anything about whether third parties, like crypto exchanges, could offer rewards to their customers for holding stablecoins on their platform. This created a legal, gray area that the crypto industry jumped on immediately. An issuer like Circle, which makes USDC, couldn't directly pay you interest, but through a revenue sharing deal, they could pass a chunk of that interest on their reserve to an exchange like Coinbase, and Coinbase could give them back to the customers as a reward for using its platform, which, let's be honest, is basically the same as yield. The banks screamed foul, calling it a blatant end run around the law. They argued that calling it a reward was just a word game to steal their deposits without playing by the rules. So when the Clarity Act moved to the Senate, the banking lobby sought its chance to slam that loophole shut for good. In early 2026, a new Senate draft of the bill started making the rounds, and it contained much tougher language designed to ban all forms of stablecoin yield, direct or indirect. This move ignited a firestorm. Coinbase, which has been a huge supporter of the bill, publicly announced it couldn't get behind the Senate draft. Its CEO, Brian Armstrong, warned it would be materially worse than the current status quo. The bipartisan coalition that had pushed the bill through the House suddenly fell apart. A Senate markup session scheduled for January 2026 was abruptly postponed, and all the bill's momentum vanished. The banks had successfully turned the crypto industry against its own landmark legislation. So as of March 2026, the Clarity Act is dead in the water. The House passed a version the crypto industry loved, while the Senate Banking Committee is stuck with a version the banking industry demanded and the crypto industry despises. This stalemate has left the future of US crypto regulation hanging by a thread. The delay is a huge win for the banks, who are using their massive lobbying power to hold the bill hostage. Groups like the American Bankers Associations are fighting hard, arguing that allowing stablecoin yield would create huge risk and drain money from the community banks that fund local economies. Adding another layer of pressure, President Trump's administration has gotten involved, criticizing the delay and warning that if this doesn't get resolved, American innovation could be pushed overseas to places like Europe and Asia that are clearly creating clearer rules. So where do we go from here? It looks like there are three possible outcomes. First, a compromise is reached. There are closed-door negotiations happening right now, but they're tough. A possible middle ground could be capping the amount of yield stablecoins can offer, or maybe only allowing rewards for specific activities instead of just holding them. But with both sides so dug in, that's a long shot. Second, the bill stalls indefinitely. With the 2026 midterm election on the horizon, the time to pass new law is shrinking. If a deal isn't reached soon, perhaps within a potential mid to late March markup window, the Clarity Act could get pushed to 2027, leaving the industry in legal limbo and the US falling further behind. Experts are skeptical about it passing this year. Third, the bill could die completely. If the banking lobby is just too powerful and the crypto industry refuses to give in, it's possible the whole thing just collapses. This would be the worst case scenario for crypto, pretty much guaranteeing that the SEC's regulation by enforcement strategy continues for years. And the banks knows this. That's why they don't want to compromise at all, because time is on their side. The fight over the Clarity Act had pulled back the curtains on fundamental power struggles at the very heart of American financial system. It's a battle between the old guard banking giants who profit from a closed system and the disruptive power of an open, decentralized financial world. The banks aren't just fighting for their profits, they're fighting to keep their spot as the essential middleman for all things money. Essentially, they're fighting for their influence and political dominance. The irony here is that a lot of people in crypto think that the community banks and stablecoin providers should actually be allies working together against the dominance of mega banks like JP Morgan. They believe stablecoins could give smaller banks the modern tech they need to compete. But for now, that alliance is just a distant dream. What started as a simple effort to bring some rules to a new technology has turned into a referendum on financial innovation itself. The outcome will decide whether the United States leads the next generation of finance or just watches from the sidelines as it all happens somewhere else. The real question is, will Washington choose to protect the powerful players of the past, or will it embrace the competitive possibilities of the future? Let me know what you think in the comments. Who's going to win this fight, the banks or crypto? If you like this content, go check out South Korea's new amendment forcing influencers to show their portfolio here. Stay safe guys, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.